You're standing in a cave in northern Spain, 43 feet underground, at the bottom of a shaft so narrow you'd have to squeeze through sideways. There's no light down here, no way in except a vertical drop. And yet, scattered across the cave floor are the bones of at least 28 people. None of them fell in by accident. None of them wandered down here to die. Someone put them here, on purpose, over and over, for thousands of years. And one of them didn't die naturally at all. Today, you're going to find out how scientists identified the oldest murder victim ever discovered. A case 430,000 years old, cracked open not by a detective, but by forensic anthropologists using the same techniques you'd see on a modern crime show. By the end, you'll understand why this one broken skull changed what we thought we knew about violence, humanity, and how far back both really go. Let's start with the place. It's called Sima de los Huesos, the Pit of Bones, part of the Atapuerca cave system in Spain. In 1984, researchers exploring the caves found something strange, a shaft over 40 feet deep leading to a small chamber, and in that chamber bones, hundreds of them, belonging to an extinct human relative called Homo heidelbergensis, a species that lived long before Homo sapiens ever existed. At first, the bones raised a simple question. How did they get there? You can rule out a lot quickly. No claw marks, no signs of predators dragging bodies in, no river or flood that could have swept them down. The shaft doesn't connect to any other cave entrance. It's a dead end, straight down, which means the bodies were carried there, deliberately, by other members of their own species. That alone was a big deal. It suggested something researchers didn't expect from a species this ancient: a ritual, a pattern, a choice to treat the dead differently than the living. But then, in the early 2000s, researchers focused on one skull in particular. It's called Cranium 17, nicknamed Miguelon. And Miguelon had a problem. There were 2 fractures on his forehead, just above the left eye, not 1, 2. Here's where it gets interesting. In forensic science, a single fracture can happen almost any way: a fall, an accident, bones settling over hundreds of thousands of years underground. That's easy to explain away. 2 fractures, close together, in the same bone, made by the same kind of blow? That's much harder to explain by accident. So a team led by paleontologist Nohemi Sala did what a modern medical examiner would do. They CT scanned the skull. They built 3D models of the wounds. They measured the shape, depth, and angle of each fracture down to the millimeter. Then they compared them to hundreds of documented cases of blunt force trauma, animal bite injuries, and post-mortem bone damage, the same database techniques used in real forensic investigations today. The result? Both fractures were made by the same object, thrown or swung with force, from roughly the same direction, in the same short window of time. Not 2 random incidents. Not a fall down the shaft, which fits with either. One person, hit twice, on purpose. This is the moment where you have to slow down and sit with what that means. Someone stood over another human being, more than 400,000 years before recorded history, and hit them in the head, twice, hard enough to fracture bone. And then someone, maybe the same person, maybe the group, carried that body to a vertical shaft and dropped it into the dark. That's not an accident. That's not scavenging. That's the earliest solid evidence of interpersonal violence resulting in death in the entire human fossil record. Before this discovery, most researchers assumed early violence, if it existed at all, was messy, opportunistic, disorganized. What Cranium 17 showed was something colder: precision, intent, and afterward a choice about what to do with the body. It's worth pausing on the burial question because it's almost as strange as the murder itself. Researchers still debate why so many bodies were placed in that pit. Some think it was symbolic, an early form of ritual, a way of separating the dead from the living world. Others think it was practical, a way of avoiding predators or disease. But whichever it was, it means the people who put Miguelon's body into that shaft weren't just discarding him. They were doing what they did with everyone else who died, following a pattern, a custom. Which raises an uncomfortable possibility. The killer, or the killer's group, buried their victim exactly the same way they buried anyone else. Violence and ritual, sitting side by side, this early in human history. Here's the part that tends to stop people. Homo heidelbergensis isn't Homo sapiens. This isn't early humans in the sense of our direct ancestors walking around a campfire. This is a different species entirely, one that split off from our lineage hundreds of thousands of years before we existed. Which means the capacity for this kind of deliberate, targeted violence isn't something that evolved recently. It isn't unique to us. It was already there, in a species that predates modern humans by a wide margin. That reframes the question people usually ask about violence: is it a modern problem, a product of civilization, scarcity, or ideology? Because the answer, at least in part, is no. It's older than we are. It was already present in the ancestors of our ancestors. So what do you do with that? You could look at Cranium 17 and see only the worst of it. Proof that hurting one another is written deep into where we came from, long before cities, long before writing, long before anything we'd call society. Or you could look at what surrounds that one skull. Hundreds of bodies, carried down into a shaft over generations, treated with enough consistency to look like custom. A group of early humans who, even after violence, still gathered their dead and gave them somewhere to be. Both of those things are true at the same time. The capacity for violence and the instinct to mark a death as something that mattered, they showed up together this far back in a species that isn't even us. 430,000 years later, a research team shone a light down that shaft, picked up a fractured skull, and answered a question no one thought could still be answered. Who was the first murder victim we know of, and how do we know it wasn't an accident? The bones don't have a name. They never will, but they have a story. And now, so do you.